I'm Coach Tarek.
And I'm Vanessa.
We are your movement experts, and we are here to educate health and fitness professionals with the tools to create real change for and within the industry.
Before we get into the episode today, I just wanted to take a little time to thank you. Thank you so much for joining in, for listening, for downloading, streaming, for all of the things that you're doing to support our podcast. We're so lucky and grateful to have an excellent audience like yourself to be able to share our message with. If you are loving what we are doing, I would ask a favor of you to please share that you're listening with us on your social media. Give us a like and a rate on any of the podcast platforms that you are listening on. And yeah, just recommend us where you can, so that way we can continue to grow, which we are, thanks to your excellent listens. I wanted to talk a little bit today about Ian O'Dwyer, who we have coming on the show. I'm fortunate enough to have called Ian a friend and a mentor in the industry, but if you've never heard of him before, he is sometimes referred to as the body magician. This man has an uncanny ability to spot movement and distinguish perhaps dysfunctions and or difficulties in ways that people move or in understanding their pain and what they're going through. It's absolutely phenomenal how pinpoint accurate he can be 99 times out of 100 with what he sees. And then not only how he sees movement and how he sees the body and how he sees you as a human, but then also how he translates that into programming, how he translates that into really interesting movement and mobilizations to help people live better, feel better, move better, and do all of those things. And his story is absolutely incredible. I implore you to look him up and search him out. All of the details are there in the show notes. I could talk to you for a little while about his history and how long he's been in the industry, but instead I'll share you a story of some of my interactions with him. And I was very lucky early on in my career to have had many education sessions with Ian. And one in particular was when we were at a PTA Global mentorship that Ian was leading. So in beautiful Noosa, and he is leading this mentorship. And one of the big things that he said to me was, Ness, you move too big. Just move a little smaller, just move smaller. And nobody had ever cued me like that before. And I thought to myself, what does he mean? Like, move smaller? Why would I want to move smaller? This doesn't make sense. And at the time I'd been struggling with like a little bit of sciatic pain. And I've always kind of known that I'm hypermobile. And recently it's become even more apparent how much hypermobility can affect people's movement and increase pain. But at the time he saw it so clearly, and I was so unstable in my joints. I was strong in my muscles, but I was really unstable in my joints. And this cue of moving smaller basically gave me the insight to take a step back from having to try to prove myself to move big, be strong without always being the smallest person in the room, but actually find movement quality that felt good for me, that I was way more capable of, and that I was way more capable of reproducing at a really, really high level. And that cue has stuck with me for such a long time. And it's not a cue that you would hear really very often in exercise or in movement. And I just love how different he thinks about movement. And so if you're interested in thinking differently about movement and thinking differently about exercise, then you're definitely on the right episode. And I am really excited to bring you this. So get yourself ready, write down your notes. I welcome to you, Ian O'Dwyer. I'm so excited. I have with me Ian O'Dwyer. Great man. How are you, Ian?
Oh, good. Thanks, Ness. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm great. I'm so happy to be here with you right now. We were just chatting briefly, but we haven't seen each other in a long time, and there's been a lot going on, and I have like a whole list of questions that I want to ask.
And it's funny though, Ness, because we spent so much time together in early days, right? You know, you were you were developing and evolving, and we were developing and evolving with PTA Global, and there was just such a beautiful congruency about what was happening. So, and now we've gone through our own directions, and as you say, because we had that space in time where things stopped. But it's kind of cool now because now it's that reconnection starting to happen.
Yeah, and I've got some questions around that as well, actually. And you mentioned the last few years, and when I speak to fitness individuals about the last few years, I kind of get the sense that it was like either challenging or there was like a lot of discovery or both kind of thing. Could you maybe give us a little bit of insight about, what you faced over the last few years and maybe some of the lessons as a fitness professional that you've taken away?
Ness, it was interesting because it was probably the busiest time of my life. Firstly, my wife had gone to New Zealand, and we'd made a decision that I was going to close my practice in Noosa and go to New Zealand, and I was going to transition backwards and forwards. And of course, I was in China the week before COVID hit. And so I got home. It was 4 months later, she's got to New Zealand. They've closed the borders. So I'm stuck in Noosa for 17 months by myself. So, having an 8 or a 9-year-old daughter, that wasn't ideal. I mean, don't get me wrong, there was positive. I got to see my 2 sons a lot more time. And also my daughter, I got to talk to her a lot more, which was fantastic. But from a work perspective, my goodness, it was just, and Nessie, that I deal a lot with the emotional, mental, not just the physical side of it, because you can't separate those. And I don't mean it's woo-hoo stuff. I mean, when you talk about a sports person and they tear an ACL, the first thing it's got to actually heal is their emotional side, not their tissues, right? Because the fear is now I'm not going to come back, or I might not get a contract, or I might not be as successful. So it's interesting that in that time, there was so much fear. There was such a heightened response and anxiety. People were becoming more and more disconnected with themselves, frightened to make decisions. Should I go and fill a car up or should I go and buy food? It was just stupid things, right? So it really brought to me the attention of, okay, once we come out of this, we'll always come out of it, which we have. Once we come out of this has to be a time for reconnection now. This has to be a time for people to reconnect to them, because if they can't reconnect to them, they can't reconnect to their partners, their family, or whoever, right? So as I was witnessing, a lot of the kids were going through all this sort of turmoil at the time. And as soon as I said to the parents, if we just stop and breathe and actually start to play with our kids again, I'll bet you the turmoil stops. And it did. The sad part was they had been so conditioned to focus on work and getting the societal things done and being part of the community and all that sort of stuff that they've forgotten about the family. And at least the positive, you'd say, if there was a positive, that we actually got to spend more time together as family, which I think was beautiful. So yeah, there was, and the thing that broke my heart was it really hurt a lot of people's businesses, because they couldn't work and their livelihoods got lost, and some people's businesses that had been going for years and years and years were gone, right? So that was for me a sad thing, but at the same time, it's just nothing. I can't control that. All I can do is control me. So it was certainly an interesting time for us all. For most of us, I hope it gave us time to evolve.
I like it. I like that journey. Like you said, that you alluded to, I've known you for a little while now, and I was very lucky in my early career to be heavily influenced by your teachings and your methodology, and I've loved it ever since I was exposed to it. And I'll go through a little story previously, but you said you can't separate emotion from the motion. And that's the one quote from you that has really stuck with me throughout my entire career, that I always say back to people, and I refer them back to you. Emotion is motion, and motion is emotion. And would you care to elaborate a little bit on that, please? Yeah,
I guess, I go all the way back to horses, and it's funny, when you see a happy horse, you see a horse that races or performs well. And my dad was, as my brothers are, a couple of my brothers are horse trainers, and amazingly gifted to connect to horses. And their biggest thing was always to have a happy horse, healthy horse, and then another horse that performs. And Dad, having draft horses, that they were his bulldozers, they were his, 24-ton excavators. So you had to have horses that were healthy to last and have tissue longevity, right? So I guess for me, learning from my family about the connection, but also learning that, when you were happy, you actually performed well. And I've got an intellectually disabled brother, and he's 5 years older than me, Ness, and it's funny, at 65 now, he's still got presents he got from 50 and he still wraps them up in sticky tape and has the boxes and that sort of stuff. And you think, there's happiness, right? He's taken the joy, and that joy allows him to put a smile on his face. Now, instantly there's this frequency of health that runs through his body. He wasn't supposed to live past 50 because he was on such a high level of dilating up until the age of 21. And at 65, still going strong, still believes in Santa Claus, still believes in Easter Bunny, and still loves his birthday. So the most beautiful thing, right? So I probably had an unfair advantage at seeing emotion and motion, not that I understood it, but could certainly feel it. And, it's like when you walk in the room, Essie, you light up the room because of your intention. Your intention is to give the person the best experience they can experience. And it's not about us as professionals knowing the answer, because I really don't believe there are answers. I believe there are solutions, but primarily the most important thing is the experience that we give that person that day. And if we can change their frequency, if we can change the way they feel, we'll change the way they move. And it's, as you know, I brought play into the industry in 2006 and people thought I was crazy, and they probably weren't far from the truth. But the interesting thing about that was, as soon as we brought play in, the laughter, the de-stress, the purity of movement that we actually started to see from people rather than how they thought they should move was amazing, right? People who were in pain started to now get rid of the pain. People who were stressed about their family were now starting to enjoy their family. People who probably didn't appreciate what they had achieved in this process were now starting to appreciate it. So it's a pretty powerful thing, emotion and motion. If we can change, whether it's through breath, whether it's through a game, whether it's through purely by being able to put a person into a moment that fills their heart with joy. I saw a picture of you probably 6 or 7 months ago, and, knowing your background and knowing how intensely passionate you are about your background with conditioning and so forth, to see you handstanding and playing like a kid, it just brought joy to my heart, right? Because that's what we're designed to do. We're designed to go out and do the things we did as kids, but unfortunately the permission gets taken away from us, and then we become old people.
It's funny that you talk about it, the permission side of it. And I've been doing a little bit of reading about this recently, and you've echoed this. I don't know if it's something I read from you or if I just read it in general, is that, as we start to grow up.
Sure whether I have yet, Vanessa.
Yeah. No, you haven't, but that's fine. That's why we like it. And I haven't physically grown, so we're both fit in the same category. But we grow up and we're taught that you're too old for that game. You shouldn't be playing, and that play is often movement, and they're so intricately linked. And like you said, that play is joy. There's this time where we're in primary school, high school, where all of a sudden people are telling us don't experience that joy anymore. Stop that. You're too old for joy. Like, that's just a crazy message in my mind.
In the last 5 or 6 years, I had people coming in, bringing their kids in with behavioural problems. Were they problems? Was it behaviour? To me, it was just a response of the environment. So we had a couple of these young boys that were struggling at school, and brought them into the studio, and we found out what they wanted to do, what they enjoyed, what they liked about school, what they disliked about school, what I thought was commonsensical. So, and then the mother went and had a meeting with the teacher and said, would it be possible to, maybe halfway through the class, could he just duck out and throw 10 hoops, have 3 minutes throwing a basketball? That's all I want. And if he can do that for the next fortnight, let's just see how his behaviour, what it does. Well, all of a sudden, the kid's behaviour had changed. His erratic behaviour had disappeared. He was doing his homework. It's that whole thing, right? It's sometimes the systems don't fit the human beings. And I'll say that again, sometimes unfortunately, the educational system, like a lot of systems, we have to fit them rather than them fitting us. The sad part about that is we're human beings, right? We're these ever-evolving, ever-changing, amazingly brilliant beings that can adapt to anything. We can change to the highest pressure. We can go into the lowest music, beautiful flow, breath. We can play a sport at the highest level. with our bodies crashing and clashing against each other. And then we can go and sit, in a bar and have a drink with someone that we've just gone out in the footy field and smashed up each other and love it, right? So with this complex tensegrity, emotional, spiritual, mental thing that I love, because there's no answers, right? There are no answers. There's just solutions, and the solutions are today. What works today?
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to dissect a couple of things there. Funnily enough, there's somewhere in my notes already. First thing, which we'll come back to, my ADHD brain will have to remind me, Tensegrity. I want to come back to there. But the first one I want to come back to is good enough, like today. Let's focus on today. And we come again from the industry who have generally the best intentions for people. And we talk about programs and periodization, and you have to do this, and this. And what you said is kind of almost a little bit controversial in regards to that. So can you dive into that, please?
So let's put it this way. I guess, my background was AFL, that I was a runner. So it was interesting because when we conditioned horses, we never did the same thing over and over and over. We tried to put variation in there to allow them mentally to be happier, allow them physically to not be as taxed on the tissues, the joints and so forth, but also emotionally, they loved going for walks through the bush or being worked through the bush. So different surfaces, sand, swim, whatever it may have been. So me as an AFL player, all we did was basically lift, and lift. Chest press, shoulder press, squats, deadlifts, lunges, whatever it may be. And the funny thing about it, from a commonsensical perspective again, is that it didn't mimic my sport. My sport was not the slightest, right? And it's kind of funny because what we see now is we have this amazing ability to build our athletes bigger, stronger, faster. And we go in and we put in certain strength components and we recruit certain hormones, we create chemical responses, and we build this hypertrophy model that looks amazing. This body, biceps, shoulders, chest, abdominals, butt, you name it, they look amazing, right? But there's one minute little thing that they've forgotten to address, and that's this stuff called fascia. The stuff that happens to encase, to invagulate everything in the body. It's nebulous, right? Now, there's a special part of the fascia, the collagen, that loves being lengthened, and it loves going to a position where it can get stronger in a lengthened position. So if we can move that at a sub-maximal load and we can start to move it in different directions, multi-directions, which the tissue loves, because fascia detests repetitive movement just like the brain does. So if we're trying to build our athletes bigger, stronger, faster, and to be more effective in the thought process, the decision-making process, it doesn't make sense that we keep loading them in the same patterns all the time. Ness, what my concern is that people say to me all the time, yeah, but it takes a lot to change the programming these days. Well, I conditioned an AFL side in Noosa in 2011, 2012. And they had won the premiership 2010, and I'd worked with a guy who had osteitis pubis. He'd missed 5 games. We got him back, he played, and they won the premiership that year. And I think he actually won the best and fairest as well. So I got involved with Wayne Fletcher, who one of the highest decorating coaches in Australia in country football. And he said, would you like to be involved? And I said, love to. And there's another guy called Danny O'Brien who had played at Geelong. So we had 2 assistant coaches. I said to Danny, I'll do the conditioning and, let's leave the play to you. And, Ness, what was interesting is that we gave them fascial mobilizers to do. We gave them roller techniques to do before they went on the ground. We gave them running drills to do. So there was 8 minutes, and then they go into a non-complex, just skill drill, 8 minutes. And then we go into 4 sets of drills that mimic the game. We didn't tell the players. We asked the players where they fell down on the Saturday. And then we'd pick 2 players to create a drill that would mimic that so we could improve that. We didn't train for any longer than 68 minutes in any session. Now, people say to me, why 8 minutes? Well, what I found was what I found was interesting, I'd gone through and watched many, many tapes, played a lot of games. Any player that's had 35 to 40 possessions doesn't have the ball in their hand any longer than 2 minutes for the entire game. That's interesting. And then the biggest thing I found was when I looked at and experienced it, most of the people who were getting injured because they were running linear. They weren't conditioned to go laterally. And it's interesting because as you and I, we were talking about not just doing a lateral lunge, we're talking about can you go into a sports position and can you move and can you deliver, can you take, can you make decisions? It's fun, right? It's what we call funness because that's what challenges us, right? So it's been interesting because of the fact that, as you know, I've pushed the boundaries, I've pushed traditional belief, and I'm okay with that. I really am okay with that because I care about the longevity of a player, not the ego of a coach who doesn't agree with me. I've got the scores on the board, I've got sons still playing, and that's not my ego. That's just the fact that I still see I call my boys, a lot of those kids still playing now. They're not kids, they're 30 odd. But even when I go back to Noosa, they ring me on the phone when I get back there, can I get a session? Can I get a session? Can I get a session? And it's the emotionness, it's not the physical. It's because they trust in what we have done. And I'll tell you, it was interesting. This is something you'll love. And it fits perfectly here. So there was one guy in particular who, he was our centre half forward, had chronic hamstrings, right? Was always getting hamstring injuries. Anyway, in these 2 years, and you know what that's like. You've been at the top level and done the conditioning. Anyway, in these 2 years, never had a hamstring issue, right? Anyway, I put some questioning on Instagram recently, and this lady come back to me and said, OD, is it possible to take pain away from the posterior pelvis? And he said he's been diagnosed with this chronic condition and they're now talking about cutting the piriformis and away we go. And I said, listen, yes, it is. There's lots of reasons we have chronic pain. And I said it can be emotional, mental, it can be physical, but let's just have a chat. How about you give me a call and we'll have a chat? Anyway, long story short, finished up being one of the players from 2011. And I said to him, why didn't you just ring me? He said, OD, I thought you had to be in the room. I just didn't give it a second thought. I said, all right, here's a posterior hip complex program. Just follow the program. Do it for the next week and then let me know what goes on. Sat down. He couldn't sit down for 3.5 years, sat down for the first time after that pain-free. And he said to me, my wife and I couldn't even go for coffee. He said, I used to do meetings. He's an accountant. I had to have to do meetings standing up. It's just ridiculous, right? We've got to understand the fabric that we're talking about. We've got to understand the tissues that we're really trying to address. So bigger, stronger, faster is great, but it's like taking a 454 motor and trying to fit it into a mini minor and expecting the mini minor not to shake to pieces, right? If we don't give the collagen and the fascia the conditioning they need to be able to work with the motor, we're going to cause problems. And you've seen it firsthand. You know the story.
I'm loving all of this. I want to give people a bit of context, maybe. I think this might help because I want to go a bit deeper into fascia, a bit deeper into tensegrity and how it's linked to emotion. So we did mentorship in Noosa. I don't even know how long ago, but a long time ago.
2010.
There you go. That long ago.
I thought that might have been one of the questions, so I researched it.
And there was me. I was still in my mid-20s. And I was Group X manager of a big box club running 250 classes a week and teaching like a madwoman and just not loving it at all.
No stress on you at all.
No,
Goodness.
no. And it wasn't because I hated the industry. It wasn't because I hated movement. Just the whole scenario wasn't great for me. So my emotions were like not good. And we had this incredible weekend. So these mentorships, if you've never been to a mentorship as a fitness professional, they're honestly like one of the most life-changing things that you can do. And I say life-changing because it was for me. And I speak to people who've regularly done yours, who've regularly done others, and they're incredible. And we're at the last day and we're doing our little recap of people and what you learnt and what was going on. And the emotion was so overwhelming. I remember bursting into tears, right? Absolutely losing it. And the response from everyone was just so, I'm already like emotional thinking about it. And it's, everyone came up and gave you that hug and it was such a really great community vibe. And, you know, those moments stick with you, like, as you can see, for your entire life. And having experiences like that, I think we really, really missed out recently. But it's also the education in our industry. We've moved away from people. It's moved to online. It's moved to, like, I mean, it's great that I can chat to you while you're not in the same country as me. There is nothing that compares to that moment, to that feeling that I had there, being immersed with like-minded people for 3 days and then finding how much that connected with me through my soul, like quite literally. And you've seen that happen again and again. What is the value of that to you? You know, considering that you've been the guy in the industry, like the weird one, the one who's challenging everything, the chaos bringer, like, what does that mean to you?
Firstly, it means that people are being heard. You know, when I witness you or anyone who comes to an immersion or a mentorship and you see the outpouring, because your intention is to give everyone the best that you can give them this. And what people don't get is that you smile on the outside, but they don't understand the pain on the inside. You know, people turn up to our sessions, people turn up to our studios, people turn up to our environments, our locations, and we're always up. And we're always up because we just love what we do, right? But it's interesting because of the fact that we're givers. And what I've learned over the last 4 or 5 years is that this is about a relationship, not about a dictatorship. So it's not about me giving to you and then you taking and seeing you later. We now create the community that now is free-flowing. It flows both ways. You know, we've had some conversations prior to this podcast, and as I said to you, my respect and trust for you is everything. That's all I need. That's all I need to have for this podcast. That's what I build everything on. So when I see someone come to something that we've done, and remembering this, that you have to experience what I do, and when you do, there's no turning back, is there? There is no, you just got to say, well, hang on. Wow, how do I challenge that, right? Because it's not what I know, it's what I have experienced, what I have felt. You know, I've got back pain, now I haven't. My knees are hurting when I do a lunge and now it doesn't. I've got a situation where, well, I can't move so well, now I can. How does that happen, right? And that's the beautiful thing, to be able to say, wow, how cool is it? I've got a room of people now who are like-hearted, not like-minded, they're like-hearted. They do nothing but try and create the best opportunity for people to be the best they can. And yet, a lot of times those people are being sucked out of, not given back to. And for me to be in that room and be able to give, and then to see the energy that's created in that room, and whether you call it energy, whether you call it frequency, I don't care what you call it, you know, we're having a conversation, that's called a frequency, that's our vibration of our voices and our ears working together. So whether you call it energy or frequency or whatever you call it, doesn't matter. It fills my heart with joy, right? As today was always going to fill my heart with joy seeing you, because as I said, to see you evolve and to see you grow and to see you become this beautiful leader in the industry that we have really makes the whole thing worthwhile. Because you know what's interesting now, Ness, is that when I had a studio, I was always aware of not wanting to hurt allied health professionals' feelings. I've worked with the best in the States. I know what the best do. I've worked with some of the best in Australia. I certainly know what they do. And a lot of them don't do what they do. Firstly, a lot of them aren't open. And when you meet people who are open, it's just like this beautiful fresh air, right? So I'm really now hoping that post of this holiday that we had that we can call COVID, that people become more open, because there's more anxiety, there's more depression, there's more stress, there's more self-judgment than ever before in our society. And I'm not even going to call it an industry anymore. I'm going to call it a fitness world. And one of the guys who replied on Instagram recently called it a fitness. I thought, what a great title. It's a fitness world, right? So it's just now what it gives back to me to see people who had the courage to invest, like you think 2010, right? Who had the courage to invest in being better, and to see them now being the best and leading at conferences and leading in, podcasts, that sort of stuff. I love it, right? Because it means that what we're doing hasn't been in vain. And, that those years with PTAG, which is gone now, they were the best guys I've ever worked with in the world, ever. Just amazing people. And to see them doing their own stuff now, it's just, I love it. I just love it.
Yeah, so many references for everyone to jump on to on the back of this podcast. I'm going to come back. Let's have a chat about fascia and tensegrity. Let's go a little bit into the science.
Oh, I love the way you say, let's have a chat. So this isn't a 4-hour podcast, right?
No, well, here we go. So this is the challenge. Is I love to explain tensegrity. One of the most challenging biomechanical concepts that you can learn as a PT or as a coach. What's the starting to understand a concept like that?
If you think about a shape, and let's say we think about the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, right? We've got this bridge, it's got this beautiful sort of arch, and we've got structure, but we've got cables. So it's interesting because a lot of those structures don't actually touch each other. A lot of those structures, and we might call them bones, are supported by cables. And the tensegrity situation is the tension and integrity of the tissues working together. So we're going to bring it back to a human component here. So we're going to say, okay, if we can imagine we've got these struts, and so let's say there's 10 of them, and we're going to support these struts by some rubber bands, and these struts aren't allowed to touch each other. And these rubber bands have a pretension in them that keep the struts in some sort of shape. Let's call that the human being. So we've got bones and we've got fascia. And this fascia is this rubbery, bendy, stiffy sort of type strut that can actually adapt to whatever the force is. Now, what's kind of interesting about that is if I had this shape in front of me, and it would be octagon. I think it's an octagon. That'll do anyway. So it gives you some sort of an understanding. So if I pushed the octagon and I pushed one of the structures on the octagon, you would notice that when I pushed it, it just wouldn't compress. It would actually shift in direction as well as compress, kind of like our bodies, right? So when, someone puts a weight on us, if we're doing an overhead push, an overhead press, if I looked at your body in micro segments, you would see that the body wouldn't respond the same because our bodies aren't symmetrical. So you'd see how there's different parts of the body have got to take more of the stress, other parts that take less of the stress. So it's kind of interesting because we used to say, oh, okay, so we've got the fascial system and the muscular system and the nervous system all intertwined that work in there. And we've got this bony structure that gives it shaped structure as well as the skin. But that doesn't sort of make sense to me. Because for me, I'm thinking, well, what's in between that stuff? And actually, what's that stuff made of? Well, hang on, let's step back a bit. Bone, 70% water. Muscle, 70% water. Nerve, 70% water. Fascia, 70% water. Skin, 70% water. So you're telling me this biological tensegrity unit that we see as just being structures is actually a fluid unit. Now, what's really cool about that, though, Ness, is that when we see this unit and you see the physical structures, what don't you see? You don't see the fluid in between, right? So I look at and feel that the body's a hydraulic system, but it's not a hydraulic that works linear. It's a hydraulic that works biologically, multidimensionally, so that when you push from the side, it forces a force and the whole body takes the tension and then it'll recoil. Hopefully it'll recoil. So if you put too much tension into it long enough, it'll break. So our whole objective is with biotensegrity is to condition the body. Think of the body as designed to have tension all of the time. That's how we self-support. That's how we change direction. That's how we move. However, it's when we have too much tension in certain parts. So a person who works at a desk all day typing on their typewriter would then be coming forward to the typewriter, having what we call a kyphosis, a rounded position. We would say there's too much tension in the front of the chest, in the neck, in the abdominals. So the tissue's probably not going to move. It's not going to slide and glide the way it's designed to. So now we become locked in that position. Now, that's not a bad position. That's just a position, right? But if I stand up to go and play tennis, probably not ideal. But if I sit down and use a computer, perfect. So think of it. How do I get my body now to have even tension from toes to nose rather than having too much tension in certain areas? It's a bit like when we say, okay, let's go and make your glutes stronger. Yeah, let's just throw this in there, because you knew I was going to do it. So, we focus on having this big butt. We focus on having this strong butt, and that's fantastic, right? But multidimensionally, if we look at the pelvis, we need the adductor system and the 3 glute muscles to function together. In fact, we need all the external rotators, which are deeper than that, to work together. In fact, we need the obturator internus to work together, and the psoas and the iliacus, and all of these tissues have to work together. Why do we pick the butt to strengthen? Because when we look at knee injuries, when we look at lower back injuries, where I look at poor posture, or what I call poor body position, a lot of times it will be because of what's happening on the inner thigh, not the outer thigh. So they're just questions I ask just for the listeners to go, well, the butt's so strong, right? Yeah, and it is strong. But if you don't have this sequencing between the inner thigh and the outer butt, if it's not there, we've got some major issues, right?
Like Vanessa going through sciatic pain for about 5 years until I figured that out. Until you figured that out. No.
Oh, don't worry. Oh, God, it happens.
No, and I think, this is why I love your education, because it's always challenged, the way things are done. And I love that kind of thinking, because I don't necessarily like the status quo either. Or I like to think outside of that. And I saw a post on your Feel SOMA website, and we were still talking fascia here, but it talked about some Vikings, and it talked about your temple dancers.
Yes.
And I'm a temple dancer.
So am I.
Which, and I know many Vikings. Could you, so you now you're starting to kind of not categorize, but you're trying to help people find a way to speak their language so that they can understand what's going on, right?
Beautifully put. So the very first thing we've got to understand is, if I'm going to give a human being some type of exercise, some type of challenge, some type of program, I've first got to know what type of tissue they've got. Now, Robert Schlepp, way back in 2003, I'll say that again, 2003, devised these various types of tissue types. And there's various types of, from temple dancer where you're really bendy, and that's where you can take your thumb and you can take your thumb back towards your wrist, or you can take your tongue and touch your nose, or you can hyperflex your, and I don't even call it hypermobile. Yes, see, Miss Bendy. So it's funny because my eldest son, he's like you, bendy, right? In fact, he subluxed his shoulder last week, and we've done some work, and he needs to do some stiffness training, not strength, stiffness training to put tension back in the fascial tissue, right? So anyway, Robert Schlepp defined the ability to have people who have temple dancer type tissue, bendy, and people who are Vikings, who are more stiff. And what that really means is that the temple dancer, the fascial tissue, doesn't have as many fibroblasts, which are purely the gardeners. They're cells in the fascia. They're the gardeners of the fascial tissue. So every time we do something, every time we exert ourselves, we'll start to break down the fascial tissue. These cells come along, they clean up the old dead stuff, and they lay new stuff down. People who are bendy, like you and I, don't have as many fibroblasts, which means we don't generally heal as quickly as people who are stiffer, unless we apply stiffness training with the likes of whole body vibration or various types of drills that we can put stiffness into our tissues, right? So my question is going to be, well, firstly, if I'm going to give a person a program, are they going to stretch? So, because if I'm a temple dancer and you're a temple dancer, and we know that our tissues don't like stretching because we stretch already really easily, stretching's not going to be ideal for us. Especially if I think of it this way, if I took my index finger and I pushed it up and I had a plastic bag here, like a shopping bag, and I pushed my finger up into the shopping bag and I held it for a few seconds and I pulled my finger out, you would see the shopping bag still stay distorted. It would change shape, but it wouldn't go back or return to its original shape. So for most of us, if we're bendy, and I can assure you now that a lot of the people, I would suggest probably 75 to 80% of people that I'm seeing now are bendy and they didn't know it. So then all of a sudden we've got to look at, what does the program look like? Do they need strength? Yes, they do. What type of strength do they need? Well, they'll need multidimensional strength. They will need some compressive strength, some traditional strength, but they'll need multidirectional strength where we're moving, various directions, distance and heights, because we've got to condition the collagen to get some stiffness. Not rigidity, because rigidity is the enemy of movement, but stiffness allows the force to come in and the force to go out. So it's really understanding what type of tissue, what do you need for that tissue, and how's the program going to reflect the movements and the strengthening component to suit that tissue so that we get optimal performance and optimal longevity, people not breaking down, not getting sick, out of that program that we design. Does that make sense?
Yes. To me, it does. If it doesn't make sense at home, I would suggest pausing it now and then rewinding and listening to it again. Because the more you listen, right?
Yeah, I hope, the one thing that we tried to do, Ness, at PTA Global, and we certainly have tried to do it in our own businesses going forward, is to make the complex simple. And it's, it really is amazing that we've got to understand that all tissues are integrated. They're inclusive. They all move together. Bones move. I had a physio tell me not long ago that bones don't move, which is a little bit of a concern when you see the calcaneus and what it does in motion. That's only one of many bones that move in the body, as you and I both know. However, I'm not blaming him. I'm blaming that way that potentially we get told things happen in our education, and that's where we get stuck. We've got to understand, to keep evolving like you have, we've got to keep searching and questioning what we're doing. I had a lady in last week, her husband actually did my immersion, Feel SOMA immersion, and he's a builder and just loved it. Anyway, his wife had come in and she had incontinence problems, and she's 29. Like, that just shouldn't be happening, right? And she was in great condition, Ness. She was like, her legs, I actually said to her, God, you've got good, strong legs, And she said, well, a lot of years in the gym, right? And I said, oh, okay, that's interesting. We've got 3 pelvic floors, and I wonder how much work you've done to connect your pelvic floor to your toe and to your tone. And she looked at me as if I was speaking another language. Right now, she's doing a high integrity level of education. So I just explained things simply to her, and we did some stuff, and she got up and she did a movement, and she was just blown away to think that she could actually feel her feet, feel her pelvis, feel that she was actually stacking up. So these are the things that we're confronted with now, Ness. It's not just a matter of go in and build strong shoulders or build a chest or, whatever. We've got people coming to us that are normally broken that we've got to try and put together again in a manner in which it allows them to live a quality of life, to be able to do what they want to do, but more importantly, to enjoy doing it, right?
Yeah, I think what I saw coming through all of that PTAG education, all of the immersives that I did with you guys, was how powerful, you get that emotional connection with someone. You trust them enough to allow them to make a change in your body, and then you feel that change in your body, and it's like your whole world has been turned upside down because no one has really understood you or figured it out before that quickly. And it changes your whole relationship to your body. It changes your whole relationship to the way that you see health and fitness. And I would love for more of the industry to open themselves up to the possibility of feeling that. And I think that we do get really channeled, a bit of, you talked about horses, we've got some blinkers on there. And I don't necessarily understand why we're so afraid to be wrong when no one has the answers for the human body.
No, they did. And look, it's hard. I was talking to a lady this morning who was an exercise physiologist, and she's got into the neuroscience side of it. And she said, oh, it's so hard because you've got to tick the boxes, right? And I get that. But the sad part about it is when you're ticking the boxes and not necessarily getting the results, then the system isn't working. And, Ness, I know my business, and I know your business, is built around a lot of organisations being unsuccessful with what they do, because people are seeking out now people who are looking outside the box. And it doesn't mean, it's funny, I put a post up not long ago and it said, they call me the witch doctor, they call me the, whatever. And it's funny because I laugh about it, but at the same time you think, wow, isn't it sad to think that I haven't got a title? I'm not a personal trainer. I'm not a physiotherapist. I don't want to be a physiotherapist because they've got too much responsibility for what I want. Not a chiro, not an osteo, I'm not a strength and conditioning. So where do you fit, right? Well, the whole thing is I'm a person who just gets motion. I get emotion and I connect to people. And I can generally give you in 10 minutes an ability to feel something. So now that you can start to take the opportunity to regain your responsibility for what you want life to look like.
I hope that at home you're really understanding how into this I actually am. So, okay, I have a question. This might lead a little deeper. We ask this question to all of our guests because we're in the fitness world. I'm going to adopt your new saying.
It's a pleasure. It wasn't mine, so I'm pretty happy. I can't think. There was someone who said, might have been, I tell you who it was. It was Kenny Manson, who's over in England.
Oh, Kenny.
Yeah, I reckon it was Kenny that wrote Fitness World, and I thought, what a beautiful word.
Shout out. Anyhow. Okay, if you could change anything in the fitness world instantly, no backlash, no whatever, what would it be for you?
I'd bring in more play. Simple as that. I'd bring in more play. I'd give the freedom to trainers to actually allow their clients to feel what it's like to be free, non-judged, and connected again. Simple. When you see people with cerebral palsy, I had a guy there last week, and all sorts of people, but when you see people with challenges, MS, cerebral palsy, Parkinson's, you name it, and you see the joy on their face from just connecting, whether it's with a balloon, whether it's with a football, whether it's, using a sandbell, whether it's using something they enjoy, a vibration, but that's why we do what we do, right? That's why we give everything to our careers. I mean, you don't travel 100,000 miles a year for the pay, trust me. It's not for the money. Because if it was, well, you'd probably still be doing it, but it's not the reason, right? The reason is that you want the world to be a better world. And if we could change something in the fitness world, play would be something that I would just click the fingers and say, away we go.
That's awesome. So good. It's interesting you brought that up because, like you said, I posted, some handstands and, running around a little bit. I teach a Monday night, we'd call it a high intensity interval class in the fitness world. But I put on a playlist of songs that myself and the people who are in the studio like so that we can have a bit of a dance around. I make fun of myself. We get sweaty. We play some games and we get our heart rate up. But we do some, exercise. Again, inverted commas, we do some exercise. And the whole class is play. Yeah, you're enjoying it. And, Zumba, hugely popular because you're having fun while you're doing it. And it gets demonized by personal trainers that it's not specific or that it's not good for you, but it's so good for you.
The only thing I've ever seen that doesn't have a tool, so you turn up to a space where there's rhythm and timing, they're smiling before they're starting to move, the energy in the room is electric, they sweat their butts off, they come out of the room beaming. It is the most amazing concept ever. I love it because when you see the purity and I don't back anything. If you want to do yoga, if you want to do CrossFit, if you want to do strength and conditioning, if you want to do whatever you want to do, just do it. But make sure that when you do it, you understand what it's doing for you. If you're a bendy person like we are, it would be very easy to go and do yoga because we would be very good at it. However, I don't enjoy it because my tissues don't need to be more bendy because if I do, I'm probably going to start bulging discs doing these. I'm not saying yoga does that, but I'm saying my tissue type would mean that I potentially would. So if I'm a Viking, doing weights continually may not be the best thing for me. I may want to go and do some yoga just to get some movement or some mobilizers or whatever. So yeah, I love that. I love the fact that you've taken a time and you've created challenges. We can call it play, but you've created challenges. You've got the music that they love. So straight away, there's a rhythm in the tissue. There's a smile on the face, which changes the tissue composition straight away. It changes the emotional heart rate. And when I talk about the emotional heart rate, it's kind of funny. People go, oh, yeah, but your heart rate's, 101. Yeah, what's your emotional heart rate? What do you mean? Well, if you're anxious going into a sport, I can guarantee it might say it's 101, but I'll bet you it's close to 130. You're burning more fuel now than ever before. So you're not going to last the distance. Well, how do I measure my emotional heart rate? I can tell by your sweating in the brow. So it's kind of interesting, right? Yeah, they're rigid. Yeah, there's so many things, right? Just think that session you're doing, creating freedom, creating non-judgment, creating a whole emotional release, a whole emotional purge, and you're doing it in the confines of a 45-minute session that we call play.
So great. I'm so happy talking to you today. I definitely will try to get you on for a part 2, particularly because you mentioned these bendy bodies, and there are a lot more bendy bodies, and that's going to be like a whole podcast on its own.
Yeah, it's quite interesting when you start to break it down and you start to look at it and you start to understand and appreciate the intricacies of what we can do to change bendy bodies. I had a young lady who was, she represented Australia in the Commonwealth Games in gymnastics, and she had C6 bulge, she had L4 bulge, I think it was, finished up getting some steel work in there, and she wanted to become a police officer. Well, can you imagine a gymnast wanting to run 5Ks because that's what she had to do for the test? It took us 12 months, but we got there. She's been a police officer now for 10 or 15 years. She's now the president of a gym organisation in Queensland, which is beautiful because she gets it. But she was bendy, like her knees were back behind her, her patellas were back behind. So you've seen it, you know it.
I feel it. I live in that body. Hence my anticipation to talk to you about this. So great. Ian, where can people go to find out more about you? I can't believe I just called you Ian, by the way.
It's funny when you get on things because sometimes you feel that you've got to be a little bit more formal, but don't worry about it. I knew you meant OD, Nessie. I knew you meant OD. Okay, they can go to feelsoma.com, to the website. In the website, there's opportunities for immersions, there's opportunities for events, there's opportunities for programs, that sort of stuff. They can go to feel.soma on the Instagram, Feel Soma on Facebook, or they can put Ian Ottawara in Google and see what comes up. They'll find Feel Soma somewhere along the line. And if they've got any questions, more than happy to have a chat to them and guide them, whatever it may be.
Thank you so much for continuing to be an incredible mentor in this space, an educator, and all of the things that you do. Honestly, I hope you never stop because I just think it's so valuable. I love it so much. So if you're listening, please do check it out. It is life-changing, career-changing, body-changing, amazing, amazing stuff. I can't speak more highly about it. Thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Thanks, Ness. Thank you for taking the time, and thank you for doing an amazing job taking this industry, this world as we now know it, in the direction it needs to go. Thanks, Ness.
We are so grateful for your support and for tuning in to our podcast. We know that many of you have friends or colleagues who would also benefit from our content, and we would be honored if you could share our podcast with them. Sharing on social media, email, or even talking about us to a colleague is such a huge help in getting our message out there. We truly appreciate your support, and we can't wait to continue to grow and connect with more people through our podcast.